In an update on the Ukraine war, a wealth of footage has recently been released from the front lines of fighting in Ukraine. As always, this video contains detailed commentary to provide more context to the recording. As you know, these videos flood our social media feeds every day, but often lacking background information. Even mainstream media starts reposting them without explaining what we're seeing.
Пострел!
I decided to do educational work and do my best to help you understand what we all see every day from the Ukrainian front, and I have made a large selection of videos with epic explosions of Russian equipment in Ukraine. Please enjoy the show. Ukraine's anti-armor tactics dispersed hit-and-run ambushes and surprise attacks on intersections, crossroads, and narrowly configured passageways against Russian invaders are known to have exacted a devastating impact upon Russian tanks. Since the earliest days of the war, Ukrainian Javelin, NLO, and Carl Gustaf anti-armor weapons have been targeting and destroying advancing Russian armor, using buildings and terrain to obscure attack positions and top-down attacks to strike Russian tanks where they are most vulnerable. What may have begun as largely defensive movements to thwart and destroy a large-scale Russian mechanized invasion has evolved into a more significant, mechanized, combined arms maneuverability to destroy Russian tanks using artillery, armored vehicles, rockets, and anti-armor weapons. The Ukrainian advance is obvious. The Russians are losing as many as 5 to 10 tanks every day, with the war tactics used by the current Ukrainian forces, the arrival of weapons, and the methodical and tactically proficient strategy of counterattacks. While such an ongoing phenomenon may not be surprising to those closely following daily events in Ukraine, it does add key context and shed new light upon continued questions about the pace of Ukraine's counteroffensive. The continued destruction of Russian tanks, including T-90s, T-80s, and T-72s, simply compounds Russia's well-documented problem of losing hundreds, if not thousands, of tanks to Ukrainian attacks. Open-source intelligence estimates by sites such as Oryx have documented the destruction of as many as 2,103 Russian tanks. And their experts caution that actual numbers are likely much higher, as they only count what they are able to document. The Oryx site reports that 2,103 Russian tanks have been destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured. According to Oryx, which breaks down the 2,103 tanks as 1,323 destroyed, 120 damaged, 116 abandoned, and 544 captured. Russian troops are attempting to hide among tall trees, knowing that Ukrainian ISR can quickly detect their movements on open terrain and offer key insights as to how best to optimize counterattacks. The continued destruction of Russian tanks in more recent months throughout the conflict is likely a result of a number of interwoven variables, including continued anti-armor weapons attacks, along with artillery and the continued arrival of heavier mechanized platforms to Ukraine. As of a recent assessment, the Ukrainians have been operating at least 186 Bradley vehicles and hundreds of Strykers, force power now added to by the Pentagon's announcement that Abrams tanks are now arriving. A key part of this equation can be traced to how Ukraine's effective combat tactics and combined arms maneuver approach, combined with Russian morale and strategic and tactical problems, have generated a combat circumstance wherein 2 Russians are being killed for every 1 Ukrainian. There is a massive disparity when it comes to soldier casualties, as available independent statistics show Russia has suffered twice as many combat deaths and casualties compared with Ukraine. Methodical, deliberate Ukrainian tactics are also likely part of this, as their forces appear to be emphasizing a careful counterattack, seeking to dismantle and destroy Russia's elaborate layered defenses in an effective and highly survivable way. Ukraine has succeeded in reclaiming 54% of the territory previously controlled by Russia, slow progress through Barbed-Wire mines, and defensive positions of the slow-paced type of trench warfare of World War I. Perhaps Ukraine's slow but steady success suggests that more progress is underway, and that invading forces will likely continue to make inroads using measured yet highly lethal and effective tactics. This was a series of defense belts that the Russians installed at complex obstacles, minefields, dragon teeth, barbed wire, strong points, and so on. This is defense in depth. Ukraine has penetrated several layers of this defense. It's not 100% penetrated, but they've penetrated several layers, and they're moving very slowly, maintaining their fighting power and deliberately penetrating the defense belt that stretches across Russian-occupied Ukraine. Yet another nuance is that Ukrainian attackers may well be moving slowly by design, given that the continued arrival of tanks, weapons, and more heavily armed vehicles is likely to massively improve their ability to penetrate Russian formations and actually reclaim ground. Therefore, Ukrainian success in destroying Russian tanks and armored formations is likely to not only continue, but potentially increase. Ukrainian FPV drones emerged as a major threat to Russian military personnel. Many incidents occurred when Ukrainian FPV drones infiltrated the defenses of Russian troops, resulting in powerful explosions. Russian soldiers in the trenches were caught off guard when Ukrainian drones dropped grenades that exploded, causing many casualties, and forcing the surviving Russian soldiers to seek other cover along the trenches while running. Ukrainian drone munitions pose a challenging dilemma for Russian combat forces, as concealment and protection against tanks and fortified structures could provide protection against conventional artillery from dropped munitions. However, the agility and precision of drones undermine these advantages, raising questions about the development of effective countermeasures against the growing threat. In separate video footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone exploding with devastating force near a group of Russian soldiers, some Russian soldiers appear to be aware of the impending threat, with some soldiers trying to escape while others try to shoot down the approaching drone. Tragically, the drone hit several soldiers moments before the explosion caused their bodies to fall on the battlefield. The remaining soldiers most likely suffered injuries from the explosion. Other drone footage released by Ukrainian sources shows an FPV attack on a Russian armored vehicle that rammed the vehicle, immediately engulfing the vehicle in flames that caused the driver to eject in a desperate attempt to escape.